The other stage is the early harvesting stage, and that is the stage immediately after maturity, and this is the stage after the 8 weeks. After the 8 weeks, the leaves are now mature, they have hardened enough, they have developed the quality that is required by the customers, by the final consumers, and therefore harvesting can start. There is no application of the field grade fertilizer or the top dressing fertilizer, because this had been applied in the earlier stages and the plant now is mature enough. It can be able to, it has all the food reserves to be able to continue growth. But depending on how the plant is, application of the foliar fertilizers can be done after every 10 days or after every 14 days, depending on harvesting, because harvesting can be done after 10 days or 14 days, and this can be applied. And hence here, the fertilizer or the foliar feed that can be applied is an NPK fertilizer, a compound fertilizer, preferably the 24-24-18 that also has micronutrients included, and this will be able to ensure that the nutritional needs for the kale plant at this level is supplemented. And once this is done, you will find that the plant will continue growing very well. And especially this is usually done because once harvesting starts, you are going to find that harvesting is done after every 10 to 14 days. And after this is done, when harvesting is done, there are two things that usually happen. The first one is the plant loses energy, because it loses energy because extra leaves that are producing food has been removed, and also it is caused stress, because where the leaf has been removed, there is an wound that is left, and this wound causes stress to the plant. And therefore these two aspects, they require that a biostimulant is used. So after one harvest, then a biostimulant should be used so that it can bring back the energy, or it can give the plant energy to overcome this kind of stress. That is the energy. It can give the plant the energy to heal the wound, and also to overcome the stress, to give it extra energy and overcome the stress of those leaves being removed. And therefore once that is done, the plant continues well in its growth path as it continues to produce. In terms of diseases, same diseases that we mentioned in the earlier stages, that is the black rot, the downy mildew, the ring spot. Those are the same diseases that affect the plant during this stage. And it is very important to consider, because as we mentioned, is that these diseases should be eliminated in the earlier stages, so that during this harvest stage, you don't have chances of these diseases coming in. But in case they come in, maybe you find them, then you just apply the same chemicals that we had mentioned in the earlier stages. But another aspect comes in, because the plant has been removed, the leaves have been removed, and there is an wound. And this wound sometimes may develop bacteria that rotting bacteria because of the wound, and these rotting bacteria may cause this plant to start rotting, or it may cause stem rot. And for this reason, after every harvest, we usually advise a spray of copper fungicide, the copper oxychloride. This copper, apart from being sprayed on the leaves, it can also be sprayed on the stem where harvesting has been done, and it will be able to eliminate any rotting bacteria developing on that particular stem. And therefore, that is the aspect that is usually deployed there. But the other diseases, similar method of control is applied as mentioned earlier. In terms of the pests, it is very important to note that during this harvest stage, the pests should not be there, especially the aphids and even the bollworm, because you find that when these pests are there, they reduce the quality of harvest. The market quality of those leaves goes down, and you may find even in terms of the shelf life may go down, and therefore you find that the pest needs to be, to be eliminated completely at this point, using the same product that I had mentioned earlier. And going back to, in terms of nutrition, we have the aspect of calcium. When you are spraying the green copper so that you can be able to heal the wound, if maybe there is a need for a foliar feed, you can mix a foliar feed, and also a calcium-based foliar feed is also added, because a calcium-based foliar feed is important because it toughens the outer cover of this leaf, making this plant to have a longer shelf life, and that is a quality that is desired by the market. And therefore, after that, weeding at this stage is also not important, because the ground is very, very well covered by the leaves, and therefore the weeds are naturally suppressed, and therefore no weeding is required. During this early harvesting stage, going all the way to late harvest stage, you'll find that we have an aspect of harvesting that is usually deployed, and it is important to be able to know how to harvest the kale very well. And as you can see, you have to harvest in a way that you'll be able to maintain the crop. And how it is harvested, there is what we call the interval of harvesting, where it takes 2 weeks. Once you start harvesting, you harvest once, then you wait for 2 weeks, and then you harvest again. So essentially, in a month, you are supposed to harvest 2 times. And during the harvest, then you harvest 3 or 4 leaves. So depending on how the crop or the leaves that will be remaining, then you harvest 3 to 4 leaves. And the leaves that are going to remain, they are going to produce food, they are going to expand, and new leaves are going to emerge, and the older leaves are going to harden and be ready for harvest in the next 2 weeks. And therefore, once harvesting is done, as you can see, the leaves or the foliage are reduced, and therefore the sunlight can be able to penetrate. And therefore, if maybe we have weeds growing significantly, maybe trying to compete with the kale's crop, then you can do manual weeding. But if maybe the crops, the leaves, the weeds are not growing in a significant way, then you can just ignore them, and the leaves that will emerge will be able to cover. So this is a crop that has already been harvested. As you can see, harvesting has been done for around a month or so. As you can be able to see on the lower side, this is harvesting that was done earlier on. It was done earlier on, and this is the freshly harvested leaves. And therefore, when you are harvesting, maybe starting from the earlier, then you are supposed to harvest in such a way that the harvested part, you harvest until you don't leave any stump, but you harvest to the stem. As you can be able to see, the harvested area have healed. And when you are harvesting, we usually advise after harvesting, the following day after harvest, you spray a fungicide, because once you harvest, this aspect of harvesting here is actually a wound on the stem, and this wound, you may find at some instances, infection may get here, or the rotting may get here, and you find a problem we call stem rot. And therefore, once you harvest, the following day after harvest, we usually advise you apply copper oxychloride. And copper oxychloride, as I mentioned, when you are spraying on the leaves, you can also spray on the harvested area, so that if there are any bacteria that may try to germinate there, they may be eliminated by the copper oxychloride. And in so doing, you find each harvested stage will be healed, will heal completely, and there will be no aspect of any rotting that will happen. And therefore, once that is done, usually done after the next day after harvesting, and it is done actually once you combine with the fungicide. You don't do it the fungicide or the copper oxychloride single application. You can apply the foliar feed and also the insecticide if they are insects, and then you can do the application together as you spray the stem. And the other aspect, if maybe for example, you harvest like this and then you leave this stump. This stump at some point it will rot, and once it rots, you're going to find it is going to affect the stem and there will be stem rot. The other thing, it will encourage germination of another sucker here, which will start draining energy from this crop, and therefore this crop will not be able to grow very well. And therefore what happens, you are supposed to eliminate it like that, so that this wound is healed and all the energy from this crop from down is able to be directed to the main shoot that is growing up. And another aspect I can be able to mention here during this harvesting stage, because you know the harvesting stage, once this crop is harvested, there is usually an aspect of stress. The plant is usually, the leaves are removed and there is a wound, and that wound, in order for it to heal, apart from application of copper, you find that the plant itself uses a lot of energy to heal that crop. And therefore, apart from healing that crop, healing that wound, the crop is still applying energy to grow. And therefore, to assist the plant so that it can be able to heal faster and grow faster, we usually encourage application of a biostimulant. A biostimulant may be a seaweed extract, or maybe a biovitamin or a bioprotein-based biostimulant. And once it is applied, it usually gives this plant extra energy or extra boost that will be able to cover the energy for growth and also the energy for healing the wound. And this is usually encouraged every 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, depending on how the crop is, you can apply it after every 2 weeks or even after 1 month. That is, you jump one spray, then the other you can apply the biostimulant. And here, since the plant is applied, the harvest is done after every 2 weeks. You find that what is usually done during the application of the chemicals, you can be able to apply the copper oxychloride. You can even apply the metalaxyl, because their period of harvest is 2 weeks. And also the other crops, like the other pesticide, like what I mentioned, lambda cyhalothrin, that is only 3 days. Lambda imidacloprid, acetamiprid for control of aphid, it takes place, pre-harvest interval is 7 days, and therefore all those can be able to applied at this stage without any challenge. As I mentioned earlier, if maybe you can be able to do harvest after every 10 days, then you have to make the consideration for pre-harvest interval as I had mentioned earlier.